So in today's video, I'm going to do a what would I do if I were you situation. I'm going to break down a 26-year-old making $88,000 per year in cybersecurity with no kids and just a girlfriend. And I'm going to give you a behind the scenes look into what Millionaire Club is. We do these breakdowns for individuals within my Millionaire Club and of many benefits within the Millionaire Club. This is one benefit that you will receive within it. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek into it before you decide to join today, because it's probably the best group out there besides Budgetdog Academy, which is a level up from Millionaire Club. But if you wanted to start your finances today at a very cheap price, $47 a month, it is a go-to. It is a no-brainer, and stop being cheap. And you're going to see how much detail goes into this 30-minute breakdown of this individual's unique situation and how I uncovered $4 million differences over 30 years based on what they're currently doing versus what they could be doing. And this is exactly the value that we provide. And again, this is one of many benefits within the Millionaire Club. And that's exactly why we have so many people in this group, because it is bar none. And it is the starting path to wealth if you aren't in Budgetdog Academy quite yet. So without further ado, let's break down this situation. Guys, let's do a breakdown here. So this is what I would do in this situation. Of course, this is not advice by any means. And so I wanted to make sure that no one thinks this is advice or takes this the wrong way. But we will do financial health checks quite often. Right now, we're doing it for John Doe. Technically speaking, it's one of you guys, but I'm not going to say who it is. I blurred the name and details out and stuff like that. But it's important to let's walk through this situation, understand fully where this individual's at, and then also what I would do based on the situation. This is going to be a detailed breakdown, so get ready. So this is a 26-year-old single individual in cybersecurity making $88,000 a year with no children, okay? So this is not everybody's situation. We'll have different situations along the way, but this is the example here. So how confident? 8 out of 10 essentially with your financial picture. How are you feeling about your money mindset? 9 out of 10, let's call it. And let's break down the actual numbers now. So I'm going to show you numbers on here, and then I'm going to show you on the actual financial statements that we're using so we can, piece them together and connect the dots. So $20,000 of cash on hand. We're using Charles Schwab and Vanguard. We have retirement assets of $16,700. Remember, we are 26 years old. We have the retirement assets listed right here, Roth 401k and pension. And we have non-retirement assets, $18,600. Those are all housed in a taxable brokerage account. How much money per month are you investing? $2,000 per month. And then money per month allocated towards investments, about $2,000 across the board, a little bit more, because if you actually do this times 26 divided by 12, it comes out to be more than just $400. This is per paycheck he listed here, but this is supposed to be per month. So I made this monthly on our balance sheet in a second. I'll show you. Goal is to save for a down payment for a house in 2 years. We'll get to that. Currently, debt, non-mortgage debt is $33,200. It's consisting of a car loan of 3% and student loan of $19,500 at 5%. We have a few insurances here: health insurance, dental insurance, car insurance, and renter's life insurance. I actually looked at the pay stub below. There is life insurance, but it's 1x your salary, so definitely not enough. We'll get into that conversation shortly. However, this individual's single, so that might not play that big of a role here. No tax planner. We have no financial advisor and no estate plan here. And so paycheck's obviously there, and then that's all down here. Everything's blurred out. So based on this situation, let's walk through what I would do step by step. And again, you guys can ask questions. That's the benefit of being here and walking through this. So I looked at this individual's budget that they submitted to me directly, okay? This is what it looks like up here. We can see based on the zero-based budgeting, there is extra left over or under every single month, which is a big no-no right off the bat, but we'll get to that in a second. The very first thing I want to go through is a cash amount that we have on hand. So if I go to the cash amount, I go over here and I see that this individual has $20,000, and I go see what actually they need specifically. So if I go over to the budget, specifically go down here, I'm going to realize that a 3-month emergency fund, based on what they provided, which I have questions about the budget itself up here, is about, let's call it $10,000. And then a 6-month emergency fund is $20,000. I noticed they have $20,000 on the dot sitting there in cash. So here's what I would do. Number one is allocate to my emergency fund that $20,000 and then bulk up my checking account to about 1 to 2 months. Let's call it $3,000 to $6,000 based on their monthly average expenses, and keep that in your checking account. So all in all, let's call it roughly $26,000 in total cash if you assume there's a 6-month emergency fund, and then that's all we need. We don't need to continue to save towards cash. There's no reason, no benefit or anything like that. If this individual wants 3 months of expenses in an emergency fund, they already have the 1 to 2 in checking. They just need to basically take 10,000 of that, put in savings and investments or a high yield savings account for an emergency fund. And then the, let's call it remaining 10 could go to your checking. Technically speaking, I would even get rid of some of that if you're comfortable with 3 months, or you put that rest, you put let's 3 to 6 in the checking, and then the remaining in the savings, call it a day and be done with it. So with that being said, let's go down to the next step. So I would say you're good on cash across the board. I'm not concerned about this whatsoever. Go to the summary tab. So we're good here. I'm going to check the box each time we get on this. Good. So same thing, good on emergency, but still saving. I see that in the additional income and expense, there is a savings account being saved and there's $13,600 and it says emergency fund in particular. So I was kind of confused why we're still saving towards that if we have enough cash already. Maybe we're trying to do the 6 months plus 1 to 2 months in checking, and that's what we're after. Regardless, this is another $10,000. Don't know if it's needed. I think people get too, slap happy with cash, and that's the concern I have there. So I think you're good on emergency funds, but I'm wondering why there's still saving happening. The other thing is, if you are saving, and this just isn't allocated correctly, I think the big goal was the house sinking fund. So understanding the details behind this is huge. So I have this added right here, this line, this is why it's red. This house sinking fund was not on the list of, it was on the list of goals, but not on the list of the actual cash flow going to it. And it's in 2 years. So there's a few things, we'll get to it in a second, but we need to understand that our house is within 25% of our take home, the actual mortgage, insurance, all the premiums, the taxes, all that kind of stuff. 25% of our take home, we have a breakdown in a second I'll do on the budget for that. Let's say this individual wants a $300,000 home. Well, that $300,000 home does not require $300,000 obviously to buy the home. It requires a percentage depending on what you feel comfortable with. Now, if this individual does a 20% down payment, let's say 0.2, they need $60,000 within 2 years. That's 24 months. If I do 60,000 divided by 24 months is my goal, that's $2,500 per month I need to save. If I look at their available cash flow, they don't have that right now. So maybe that house is out of range for a 20% down payment, but let's say we do a 10% down payment. That instantly becomes $1,250 over a 2-year period. They have the available cash flow. I can tell you that right now because one, some of it's going to a brokerage, some of it's going to a savings account. That's already $1,600. Plus, if you look at this, there's a lot of inefficiencies here to where you could add to that puzzle every single month. Now, these months are really good, by the way. I wouldn't be upset if you're $17 or $3 over. You're good. You've assigned all your stuff there. But these months are getting a little larger, especially this month. And I think it's because May obviously hasn't happened. It's projections and not everything's there. Assuming you put the $1,600 here, it would be dropped down a little bit. You probably have a little bit of extra variable income. But still, even at that, this is only the mortgage. So let's say you have an average month that month of like $3,500. Your cash flow obviously dips. So this is a more realistic picture of what that looks like to FYI, but it's still way above what we need it to be. We want to allocate these dollars in an efficient route. So I'm going to take that out real fast. So that's where I would say on the sinking fund for the home is get very detailed about what down payment you need. First off, the price that you're buying, the range that you're buying in. Usually 3 to 5x of your gross income. This individual's income is $88,000. So 88,000 times 3 would be about 264 is a good range, all the way up to 88,000 times 5, obviously 264 to 440. That's a pretty big range. Just make sure that you can afford the down payment and also the monthly cost. Not to mention, when you get a new house and you're young, you're 26, you have to understand that, like, when I bought my first house and we didn't have blinds, for example, we bought our house, we built our house. So when we got in, we had to purchase like blinds, and that's like an extra $2,500 for the whole house. Now, that might be even more depending on the house that you live in. I know the new house I live in was bought and it was already, so somebody already built it, right? So the blinds, they have like these really expensive shutters that would be the $15,000 upgrade. And so those little things, furniture, things of that nature. I saw furniture listed on your budget here and there's zero. You want to be able to account for that from a cash perspective. So when you're assuming this down payment, we have to understand a lot behind just not the down payment, but what we can afford from a monthly basis. So this right here, let's say we do 10% down and we want to make sure we get into a conventional loan, not an FHA loan, because we want to be able to refinance out of the PMI. Because if you have conventional loan under 10% or under 20%, you have PMI. It's an extra mortgage pay or an extra payment fee because you're a high risk borrower or considered by the standards, right? FHA, if you do like a 3.5% down, you might not be able to get out of that PMI ever. And so I very much advise you not to do that. Now, I went to that. That's why I'm saying this, is because I did a 3.5% FHA initially before we paid off our house entirely, because we refinanced in conventional. But I had to refinance, and luckily the time we did years ago, rates were really low. We were able to refinance out and able to get that PMI off the books. but some people never can, especially with the low rate mortgage they locked in, and all of a sudden rates are a little higher. They can't refinance, so they're stuck in that PMI. Be very careful getting locked into PMI for your whole life. Not the end of the world if the deal makes sense, but be aware of that. So let's say you do 10% down, that's $30,000, you need $1,250 per month. You have to start to plan that out to make sure you have this down payment. But not only that, think about the additional furniture costs, think about the additional closing cost, all those additional cash out of pocket costs that are going to come your way with a house. And so getting that in line with this budget is going to be key here. I'm not going to make that decision for you, but these are the considerations you have to begin thinking through. Okay. So that's the beginning house sinking fund. And you're going to have to take that out of your investments and or make more money or reduce expenses in order to get that $1,250 on the line item so that in 2 years you have the $1,250 available. Now let's do a budget breakdown here above. So this is a high level assumption based on what you've actually spent year to date. So we can base everything off expectations, but I also like the actuals here because it shows me what you've actually spent and what's actually gone in and out. So if I annualize this, I basically took divided by 5 months that you had right here, and I multiplied by 12 months. So I get annualized values. So of my actual gross income, I am paying 23% out of my paycheck. Pretty reasonable, I'd say. With taxes, insurances that you mentioned, health insurance, that dental I think is there. A little bit of life, technically speaking, is there. I think it's good. I think you're in line with that. I think from a take-home perspective, based on your gross, you're good there. I think I would consider this a win. You have some extra income as well. This is what I want to break down here. These 4 items. So your expenses that you listed here, if I annualize that, those would be 53% of your take-home. I think that's pretty reasonable because that gives you a lot of wiggle room to do a lot of stuff with. But if you add the one-time expense, we're at 60 right there. So we have 40% essentially, let's say, to do whatever with. But I think what's happening is there's a little mismanagement going on here. And here's why. It's because obviously this is divided by, so these are divided by take home. So this is divided by the 68,000 here. So we have a little less realistically speaking, but let's just say, and this is divided by gross because I wanted to see where your investments were for your gross pay. Now, technically speaking, this doesn't account for your 401k. If I decided to do that, it would be, let's do plus 400 times 26, divide that by 12. And I want to see exactly where that's at and put you at. So divide this by totals. We would have like 29% of your take home pay is going to, or gross is going to investments. You're doing a superb job there. Now of the savings and investments, like I said, some of that's going, a big portion at least, is going to your emergency fund, which I don't think needs to be going. But if you realign that, you're golden. Like you got your emergency fund done. Take this extra money and either put it towards the house down payment, because if you're doing $1,100, that basically covers this $1,250 within that time period, which is really, really good, and that puts you in a good spot. I really like where you're at. If you reallocate this cash down here to this sinking fund, and that puts you in the driver's seat to get the house, to continue investing at a high level, and you are in a driver's seat for your success long term when you're young, man. Like this is going, you're going to crush this. So that's my thought on the savings and investments piece. And then you have the unaccounted for. This is the big no-no and the big thing that happens a lot of times with either high income earners or just people that just don't have a good investment or financial plan, is they don't account for everything. And so if I just took what this was year to date, obviously this one's not probably fair to assess based on this, but let's even do divided by, if I do, instead of F9, let's do E9, and then let's do divided by 4, because the first 4 months is more realistic. Divide this, times this by 12. So let's see, where this is, why this is going to pop out is because this is pretty much a net negative here. So it's not going to show too much unaccounted for. Let's put this back into divided by 5. So I want to divide this by 5 months, but I want to also show a realistic picture of this month, a little more realistic. So let's do 30. What's the average of this right here? So average is 3285. So let's use 3285 as an average month of a spend here. And let's see what it shows up. Still 7% unaccounted for. So that's assuming you have 1,800 left over. And actually, you probably should take the average of this extra income as well. So let's say 320 is the average there. So you probably have 8% that's unaccounted for and inefficient. So that's a huge win in a good way, because this is where I find a lot of extra money in people's situations. If we can allocate this extra 8%, think of what you can do with that. That's a lot of extra money there that you can actually apply to your situation, whether it be investments. I'm going to show you on 2 different things. So number one, let's say we had an extra $5,500 per year, divide that by 12 as an average month. So let's say an extra $460 per month is what we had to work with. Now there's 2 ways to do this and see where we can make a ton of money, right? So the first one's a compound interest calculator. If I go here and I do a compound interest calculator, and let's just say this is extra. So this isn't where you're starting. This is just extra money. So you have what, $33,200 to start with. That's where you are currently. But if you're investing a lot of money, I'm not going to do what you currently invest. Actually, you know what, I will, because this will show you a more realistic picture. So you are investing, let's say you have $2,000 to invest every single month that you're investing. And let's say this is over a 30-year time period and you have a 10% historical return. If I calculate that, you have $4.5 million, which is awesome. That's awesome. You're on a very good trajectory, by the way. But here is where I help people out in a lot of ways. Let's say you have an extra 460. So 2460 is the truth. And this 4.5 million turns into 5.4 million. So if efficiencies are in place and you have an automated financial system here, then your 4.6 becomes 5.4. Let's just call it an extra almost $900,000 across the board over a 30-year period. This is where people win big. So you take that extra money, you efficiently put that to work, you have an extra $900,000 at the end of 30 years. Now, here's what also happens is that you're young, you're making $88,000, you're in cybersecurity, you're gonna make a boatload of money with time. If this process continues, there's more inefficient dollars at scale. And so we want to get this locked in at a young age, because then when you scale, you'll be more efficient. And this 5.4 million versus 4.6, $900,000 difference is going to even get larger of a gap if you don't get this in order now. And so that is an important concept here, is we need to make sure that you aren't doing so being inefficient at a low level, because now at a higher level, you're going to be more efficient. So that's the breakdown above. Obviously, there's a little bit of difference because we're taking gross and divided by take home just because of the percentage that we're comparing here. So I'm going to check the box here. We're good there. Budget breakdown and estimate tab. So let's go over here and see kind of where we're at. So take home pay is your annual take home of $68,000. I annualized your expenses to see kind of a high level snapshot. Now, lots of things here to consider. Number one is your housing, technically speaking, is over and above what I like it to be at. It's 36. I like it to be at 25%. Some people are okay with 30%, just kind of depends. But I like personally 36 or 25%. So when you're looking for this new house, I would stay within that range of 25% or lower. This also, I don't know if this is considering like all of your property taxes and things of that nature. I don't know what this is actually considering. I think it's rent right now is what you told me. You're looking for a house, so it's probably rent, and therefore that's the total rent cost. But when you get into this next house, think about how ways to get this under 25% of your take home. You don't want to lock up a big portion over a 30-year period. Obviously, you'll increase your income. You can come down in the percentage as you increase your income, because that fixed payment stays the same. And so if you increase your income from $88,000 to $250,000, but your payment's X amount, you are going to be in a good position long-term, 100%. But you got to be careful about it, because if you spend too much, that locks you. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. And some people get in over their head because they think this house is great. As a young professional, a lot of times I let things slide up to 35 even. I want to be careful when I say that. I want to make sure you're in a prime, position to where your income will increase. If you're not in that position, you're not a young professional, you're 48 making the most money ever, you need to stay within 25%. If you're a young professional, I give a little bit of wiggle room over 25 because I was in that position. Now, I will tell you right now, we made $92,000 as a joint couple at that time when we first got in our house at 23 years old. I made $50,000, my wife made $42,000. $92,000, we stayed within 25% at that age, which gave us a ton of wiggle room to do what we've done over the last decade. We've been able to move at a fast pace because we didn't lock ourselves into that big payment. Change your life forever. So highly recommend it. It's obviously, this is not advice. This is just your whatever you want to do. I think all the other expenses were reasonable. I would be careful with this credit card just because that's the big portion. And it's just, we need to break that out. We never want to budget by credit card. We want to break out what the credit card actually entails, so it's not a big black hole. The other things is down here, like this budget is real simple. Like there's not a whole lot going on here. Other categories to think about, well, we didn't include food, so maybe the inefficiencies over here is actually going to food, or maybe the food's being covered on the credit card. I don't know necessarily, right? It just depends what the situation is. I don't know what this credit card's, it could be all of these things. I don't know. Fun, you want to live, right? You want to have a good time. Miscellaneous, travel, gas and oil change, maybe that's in car payment. I don't know all the details. I haven't worked with this individual one-on-one. This is just a submission I got, but all those things want to be considered. We need to make sure we do a 3-month look back analysis, fully detailed in this. So a Millionaire Club in the classroom, the second step we do is 3-month look back. We want to do and use this tool to make sure that we're getting things done the efficient way, basically visualizing what actually is happening. Look in the mirror and make sure you're paying attention. So that's very important. So that's what I would say on this budget template is it's very clear cut. The other things from just like a presentation perspective, there's been overwriting over here. That's not how you should do it. From a technical perspective, like all you have to do is enter it in here once and it should transfer over here, but you've obviously overwritten this. As you can see here, these all should be, if I just did that, it would show up as this, right? And these formulas are nothing changed from this, but obviously you can see all my different categories. As you can see, they're all over the place right now because there's been things moved around that I have not done, obviously. But if you zoom this up all the way to the top, you can see the formulas now are in place, and that's why this is showing this. And if you go over here, that's why this is showing this. So if I actually did that, you can see now it looks all pretty, right? So make sure you do that. Don't manually enter this or mess with this stuff because you're going to have issues with it. Continue to do the actual entering. This all looks good across the board. Just don't manually manipulate a lot of this stuff because it's meant to not do so. It's meant to make your life easy, not to make it challenging. And you're making it challenging by doing this adjustment. So that's the budget breakdown I would have here. Let's go on to the big stuff. So cash flow assessment. So right above, we have some cash flow assessment. So obviously right now we have, let's call it on average, let's call it $1,610 per month. But on top of it, we also have an average of $459 on top of that. So if I did $1,610, plus $460 rough estimate, we have $2,070 for cash flow purposes. After income, after expenses, we average $2,000 per month that we can put somewhere. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you the assessments of everything. Now, you mentioned you want a house. You mentioned you might want to pay down your debt. You mentioned you want to invest money, and we'll do all those assessments in a second. But the key here is the cash flow assessment. We have an extra $2,000 a month we need to allocate appropriately to our goals, which is huge. It can change your life in a major way. So now let's go on to the debt assessment. Now I want to go pull up your amortization schedule, and there are two loans. There's a car loan and a school loan. They're both low interest. One is 5%. I consider anything over 6 or under 6 pretty reasonable interest. And car loan of 3%. Now I'm not here to tell you to pay this off at all. I'm just going to show you what can happen. If you put towards this car loan, right now, the way we have this structured is you are going to be paying this off in 4 years. Probably a 5-year car loan, you paid the initial amounts. You have 4 more years, 48 months. On top of that, you have a student loan that's going to take about 75 months. 75 months divided by 12 is a little bit over 6 years. Now, you're young, so this is a decision you're going to have to make. And we have a pay off debt or invest YouTube video you can search if you want to watch and walk through this framework. But I'm just going to show you what can happen. So if I were to put $2,000, what we came to the conclusion of $2,000 extra dollars, we pause investments, we pause the savings, and we just aggressively pay down this debt. Now, I'm not saying to do that. I want to be very clear on this. I'm going to show you what could happen. So $2,000 per month would change 48 months into 6 months essentially here. And you'd pay off your car loan in 6 months. Now, I'm not saying to do this in order. I'm just going to give you a mathematical equation. You'd have an extra $300 per month. So now we'd have $2,300. $2,000 initially plus $2,300. We wouldn't be able to start this process until month 7 over on the school loan. And in fact, I want to reverse actually this equation so we're clear. I'd probably pay off this loan just so math purposes. If I were to do this, it would do this first. So we changed the 76 months, the 6.5 years almost, to 8 months over here. And so therefore the car loan can begin in month 9, let's call it. So this is where the first crossed out is, meaning you're done with this car payment or the school loan payment pretty quick. But now we have $2,300 cash flow because we got the minimum payment back plus that initial cash flow. And so in 8 months, we're debt free from our student loan. We take $2,300 in month 9 to begin, and we start to see how much this could chip away at this debt. $2,300. Basically, let's call it 12 months is really your reasonable debt payoff timeline. In this, I'll speak from experience. We did exactly what I'm walking you through now. I was young. We were 23 years old. We had some invested money. You have $33,000 invested up. And I said, the best bang for my buck's probably investing long-term, all my money paying down low interest debt at a low rate. But I also like my life and I like to be debt-free, and I enjoy my maximization of my life, not just my dollars at all times. So I considered both of them. I did the math on both sides. I saw what I would lose if I did this in a theoretical world. We decided to pay off $76,000 in non-mortgage debt in 1 year. Based on your cash flow, I'm seeing you could pay off your student loan and car in 1 year. You could then be in the driver's seat to have $2,600 back, right? Because you would have $2,300 plus another $300. So you have $2,600 cash flow back in your pocket in 1 year to do whatever you want, plus all your income and raises. You have zero debt on your hands. and now you can get your house at a quicker rate. You can start to invest at a quicker rate, and you never have debt again outside of your mortgage, and that's a beautiful feeling. So again, this is just theoretical, and what you could do, and why people move so fast is because they see the outcomes of this when they work with me. So $0 there, $0 there, okay? I'm gonna put this back to normal. So you could pay it off in 76 months between the two debts, totally fine, whatever. That's my debt assessment that I would want to at least cover with you. So that's using the true cash flow. Now, the other thing is investment assessment on the balance sheet. So if I go to the balance sheet, I see the situation down here. So if I looked at a snapshot, we have $20,000 in cash over here. If this is a snapshot, $18,600 in non-retirement, $16,700 in retirement. Vehicle is worth $21,000. We have that debt, obviously, to pay off at $13,700 on that. In the student loans, we just talked about $19,500. Our net worth is now $43,000. We are currently investing $600 per month into the brokerage account. We are currently investing $400 per paycheck. Times that by 26, divide that by 12 months. On average, it's $867 per month. That is what we're currently investing in these different investment, the Roth 401k, as well as the brokerage account. So I like that, don't get me wrong, but if we invested the $2,000, we now have additional, let's call it 1466. Go back to this compound interest calculator to show you the massive difference we have here. 14,600, starting at 33,200 for 30 years at 10%, again is, I have that wrong. Let me see what, 14,600, sorry, 1460. Is 3.4 million. Now, if we add an extra 2,000 to the mix, it's going to be a pretty significant difference. So 3,460, we take all of that extra cash flow, apply it to our investments for the 30 years. That 3.4 million becomes 7.4 million. That's a $4 million difference. $4 million difference. Efficiency of our dollars is key. So now that we know that, we have a decision to make. Do I want to apply all this money towards my investments extra and have $4 million more? Do I want to pay off my debt for 1 year and then apply the rest of the cash flow here at a $2,600 clip? Because if you think about it, let's look at the reality. So really quick math, if I did 1 year to pay off all of our debt, technically speaking, that first year, I would have $33,000 growing at no extra contributions at 1 year, and I would have $36,000. So now my starting point would be $36,520. And then I would have now, instead of the 1466 plus 2,000, we would now have an extra, let's call it $600 extra to work with. So let's call it $4,100 for rough math, but for 29 years, because we went 1 year without doing this for 10 years, and we would have roughly 7.8. That's just rough math. And so you'd have a little bit more, you'd be debt-free at a quicker rate, you'd be able to move a lot faster. That's up to you. Now you got to calculate everything. There's some more detailed calculations. Go watch my YouTube video, Pay Off Debt or Invest, if you want to see the exact calculations. This is just estimates on the fly, okay? But this sounds pretty good to me. And that's assuming you never increase your income, which you will. So pretty good spot to be in. Now, that's my investment assessment. Again, this is where efficiencies of dollars and automation and systemization comes into play. Now, my insurance assessment, the last thing I want to talk about is your insurance. So if I go back to the balance sheet, I saw that you had a car, health, dental, and you had renters. Obviously, in your situation, homeowner, same thing. 4 other things I want you to consider. Now, we'll talk about life insurance at the end. ID theft protection would be a pseudo insurance. I think that's very smart. $5 a month, you can get it through pretty easy. One thing I want you to really consider is long-term disability. If you were to become disabled, 1 in 4 of us become disabled during our working lifetime, who's going to pay you? Disability is a very key assumption to make that you would probably need. I would assume you need this. How much? Usually 70% of your gross, because if you're paying the premium, then you receive these proceeds tax-free. If your employer is paying, you get taxed on those proceeds, so be careful with that. The other piece is umbrella insurance. So if you are, your car insurance isn't fully covered, there's some dog bites a neighbor type little things like that. With other insurance, this is an umbrella coverage to cover you for those, deficits that potentially could occur. Umbrella insurance, usually up to net worth, is key. Your net worth, respectfully, isn't super high at this point in time. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, our net worth is, well into the multiple millions, right? We adjust our umbrella insurance in accordance with our net worth a lot of times from time to time. We don't always adjust this like every day or anything like that. But from time to time, we assess what's our potential risk of loss. That is what insurance does, and umbrellas plays a big role there. Life insurance is interesting. So there's no dependents, there's no kids, you're single, and you're 26. Now, Here's the only case for life insurance is you lock up a term life insurance policy till, let's say, a 30-year term or whenever you're going to potentially be financially free. So when you do have kids and family, if you do, if you don't, I don't know if this is necessarily, reasonable to do, but let's say I know there's a fiance in the picture or at least a serious girlfriend. Let's say you guys have plans to start a family in the next 1 to 2 years. It might make sense at 26 years old to lock in a policy at a fixed rate at a low rate from a term life insurance policy for the long haul. And I think that could be really reasonable to do. What I don't want you to do is lock yourself up in a policy that you don't need necessarily because you're not having kids and you're not planning on getting married or something like that. But a lot of times insurance goes up as you age and have more risk, right? And so life insurance is one of those things where you lock in for, let's call it 20, 30, whatever amount of years that you want. And you can get it at a low premium and lock that in for the whole 30-year period. And as you age, it gets more expensive. So you could pay the cost now to overall pay less throughout your lifetime. Ideally, you want life insurance, roughly speaking, 10 to 12x your income. That's a good rule of thumb. That's not necessarily how I would calculate it. And you want it for the entirety that you're not financially free. That's a good rule of thumb. You can watch videos on my YouTube on real precise how you calculate it. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody calls for a different amount. So those are the insurance assessments I would use or the adjustments I would have. And this is a really good initial starting point, but I think there's a ton of investment or a ton of adjustments I'd be making. Obviously, to summarize a few, the things we talked about, and I think your life could change by millions of dollars with time if you do these things the right way. Again, this is a great starting point. This isn't like precise and this isn't advice by any means. These are just things, if I were in this position, these are things I would consider, adjustments I would look at. And if you take these, you'll probably be better off essentially, right? Ultimately, you have to make that decision, but I hope this helps kind of summarize a deep, detailed breakdown of somebody's situation. Let's review the situation for anyone that missed it or skipped forward. 26 years old, single in cybersecurity with 0 kids, making $88,000 per year. Pretty confident with their finances, pretty comfortable with their money mindset. Obviously, all the numbers we broke down, I'm not going to break those down again, but you can see those on the screen. And I guess one last piece of advice is as you get a more complicated financial picture, tax planners will come into play in a massive way, and planning taxes will be important. Do not think you need this. I think that's a good bet that you can learn this stuff on your own. You will, as life gets more complicated, need a estate plan for sure, without question. Trust, will, whatever the case is for you. And other than that, I think this situation looks really, really good, John Doe. So hopefully this helps, and let me know if you have questions on this takeaway and how we can help you. So I hope you enjoyed that breakdown. If you're looking to join Millionaire Club today, go in the show notes below and click the link to get started right this second. Again, it's only $47 a month, and I'm very confident this group would change your life in meaningful ways. So stop sitting on the sidelines, join today, and I will see you very soon.